The human mind, our biggest strength, our biggest weakness. A complex world. A complex industry. How does the mind influence decisions, overcome bias, and manage risk? Future-facing, change-making, together thriving, policy driving, myth-busting, member backing. Build your network, share insight, discover new thinking.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, I've got a few waves there as well. Well, welcome to the PLSA's Investment Conference 2020, Mind Over Markets, and it's lovely to see you all. It genuinely is lovely to see you all. There have been a number of moments over the last few weeks when, well, I wasn't sure that we were going to be here, but here we are. So welcome, and it's lovely to see you, and thank you very much for making the effort to come up. Now, I had hoped at this point in my remarks to be able to announce that this was another record-breaking conference with more fund members than ever before registered to attend, but, well, circumstances conspire. We shall have to wait and see when the footfall is finally counted whether we've achieved that one, but fingers crossed. It is still going to be the second biggest pensions industry event of the year, with the first best being our annual conference. And I shouldn't say best, I should say largest. But we may still set another record during this conference. If we have an outbreak of coronavirus and we have to self-isolate while we're here, this could be the longest ever investment conference we've ever had. Fingers crossed for that one. But wouldn't that be great? Because we'd get 2 weeks of policy debate, 2 weeks of investment discussion without being hindered by petty little things like the day job or family. Wouldn't that be absolutely great? Because this is the place for that sort of discussion. This is the place for that sort of debate. It's the place to meet friends, colleagues, and peers. It's the place to meet your clients or your advisors. It's the place to meet other people's clients or other people's advisors. So it's the place to see evidence presented that you've never seen presented before. It's the place to hear opinions expressed that you've never heard expressed before. And it's the place to be to see viewpoints that you've never seen before. So it is the place to be to revisit your own decisions and your own positions and to reaffirm them, revise them, or radically alter them in the light of the evidence that you have gathered while here at Investment Conference. So it really is the place to be. Well done for making it here. We're also going to be considering how you actually make those decisions. Mind over markets is the strapline for the conference. So the physiology and psychology of investment decision making. So do make the most of that. Now, the American poet and philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the problem with money is that it costs too much. And what does it cost you? What does it cost us? Well, your time, absolutely. Might cost you your mental health. But does it cost you your planet? Well, the jury is well and truly in on that. There is absolutely no doubt at all. Money is currently costing us our planet. And the observant amongst you, and I'm sure that's all of you, will notice that climate risk is running through the centre of our conference programme. Through the plenary sessions and through the new climate risk breakout session. And incidentally, that conference programme this year is only available online on the conference app or on the screens that are dotted around. And that's because climate risk is a major and systemic risk that affects every part of the economy, every business model and every company. And as a consequence, we as investors or advisors and providers to investors simply cannot ignore it. In fact, it would be a dereliction of our duty if we were to do so. Now, last year was a remarkable year in a number of different respects. Just one of those was the sudden and rapid acceleration in the public's perception of its environmental responsibilities. And that's in large part thanks to Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion. Now, they purport to speak on behalf of the British public, on behalf of the public. And the public are, of course, our members. They are demanding that we change. The Pensions Minister is demanding that we change. The regulators are demanding that we change. So perhaps change we should. Now, of course, a lot of us already are, a lot of you already are. Many of our members, particularly the local government pension schemes, have been at the forefront of environmentally aware investing, and a few of them have been playing leading roles in industry initiatives such as Climate Action 100+, including the Church of England Pension Fund and the £30 billion Brunel Pool. The Brunel Pool, incidentally, who recently threatened to fire their asset managers unless they took action on climate risk. So, and elsewhere, as at the end of 2008, over £100 billion of assets were invested in mandates with a social responsible mandate. Over £2.8 trillion worth of assets were voted on AGMs on the basis of sustainability. And over £2.2 trillion worth of euros of assets had exclusions. In fact, the UK Sustainable Investment and Finance Association says it is almost certain that the UK is leading the market for SRI by some margin. So we are starting to make some progress. Climate-aware investing is on the rise, but so too is climate regulation. The new rules that apply to trustees in relation to ESG and the analogous requirements that apply to personal pension providers as enforced through the mechanisms of their IGCs are designed to change our collective behaviour, to force us to consider long-term financial risk, specifically climate risk. But although these rules are a start, they are not, in our view, enough. Now, to be clear, we're not arguing for an increase in the regulations, but we do believe that we have a fiduciary and social obligation to go beyond minimum compliance. Now, that's not to say that we should ignore the very real practical constraints and restraints that apply to us. This is a new area, and there's lots of complex practical and legal issues that we need to get to grips with. And let's be absolutely clear about one thing. Recognising that complexity should not be taken as a reluctance on our part to want to address the underlying issues. That is a fundamentally flawed characterisation. And if we move too fast or too hard, we run the risk of doing significant amount of economic or financial and economic damage. So we need to find the right balance. So while it's important that we do this correctly and slowly, it's better to do this slowly and correctly than to do this too fast. We still think we have an obligation to push those boundaries. And that is at the heart of one of the PLSA's key priorities for 2020, investing for good. Now we're going to do 5 things to help you to invest for good. The first is data. We want there to be a well-informed public debate. So we're going to be gathering all the stats and statistics together and then presenting them to you so that you can have that properly informed debate. Secondly, guidance. We want to support you, our members, with guidance so that you're up to speed and ready to act as regulatory and legislative change comes through the system. Those changes to the ESG regulations I mentioned last year, which place a new emphasis on climate risk, are one of a number of rapidly evolving regulatory and legislative and policy developments which we're all trying to get to grips with. But as I've already mentioned, putting those into practice is technically complex and practically difficult, particularly if you use pooled investment funds. So it's vital that schemes are allowed time to come up with their approach and to implement their approach to ESG across different asset types and different asset classes. Now, trustees will want to rely on their asset managers and consultants to help them through this process, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that they also are learning about ESG. This is a new area. So we need to give everybody time to adapt their approach to tactical and strategic asset allocation, manager selection, stewardship engagement, and all of these other things. We need to give trustees support, help, and time. Now, we're going to help out with the help and support. We can do less about the time for you. Although I would point out we've been talking about ESG, not since Greta Thunberg stopped going to school, but since well before then. Now, last year we published 2 guides on ESG that are amongst our most popular ever. July's ESG and stewardship guidance included a section dedicated to climate risk, which was forwarded by the Minister Guy Opperman. And the Minister's going to be here tomorrow to launch a consultation on guidance for asset owners on how to consider, monitor and report climate risk. We played a major role in putting that guidance together. And climate risk is also a major part of the stewardship and voting guidelines that we published just a few weeks ago, which calls for companies to behave responsibly and for pension funds to hold company directors and their asset managers to account when they don't. And this year, we'll be producing guidance on the second Shareholder Rights Directive, which aligns with our aims of increasing transparency and accountability and encouraging long-term thinking from investors. Thirdly, standards and rules. Transparency is a great way of driving change, of driving improvement. And if you want evidence of that, look at the work done by the Cost Transparency Initiative, or CTI, in relation to investment costs and charges. The CTI is our joint initiative with the Investment Association and the Scheme Advisory Board for the local government pension schemes. And they have now rolled out their templates for cost and charges disclosure to the investment industry. Now, they say that what gets measured gets managed, but a preliminary step to that is that what gets disclosed gets measured. To date, there have been over 12,000 downloads from the PLSA website of the CTI tools. And the early empirical evidence is that they are driving down costs. And if you want to see some case studies, well, we've published a new Viewpoint magazine today with 3 case studies, RPMI, RBS, and the West Mids Pension Fund. They are well worth having a look at. And if you haven't looked at those tools, go to the website, get them. They will help you to control costs. So transparency works. And we want that same level of transparency when it comes to climate risk. So the PLSA will continue to work with government regulators, industry associations, and the financial services industry to improve the quality of the data that you see so that you can make better informed decisions. The voting guidelines that I mentioned just now, we want to see large companies moving towards the level of disclosure recommended by the TCFD and other third-party frameworks such as the Carbon Disclosure Project. Again, to put you in a position where you can make better informed decisions. Fourthly, I'm nearly there, I'm getting there, thought leadership. Naturally, we're going to look at some of the leading figures in the industry to help see our way through all of this. So as well as talking to a broad range of our membership, we're going to ask some of those industry leaders to contribute to a portfolio report, identifying the problems and identifying, more importantly, some of the solutions that we can deploy to help us fix these long-term problems. So look out for that as we get nearer to the October conference. And finally, fifthly, finally, there's you and me. Now, I spent a lot of last year talking to members about trust in pensions and trust in financial services, and we put that together into a report that we presented at annual conference. I want to spend this year talking to you, our members, about ESG and climate risk, about the challenges that you face, the solutions that you've developed, so that we can then share those ideas around. For example, it's becoming increasingly clear that to us that in this highly intermediated investment chain currently isn't working as optimally as it should be doing in terms of disclosing and providing us with information. So I want to hear about that from you. Secondly, schemes need consistent information presented in a consistent way. We're not getting it. So how have you dealt with that? What solutions have you come up with? And thirdly, well, around about 35% of pension scheme assets are invested in pooled funds. It's incredibly difficult for trustees using pooled funds to deploy practical solutions. So how have you dealt with that? What ideas and suggestions do you have for addressing that particular problem? So I want to talk to our local groups, fund CEOs, fund CIOs, members, and anybody else. And I'd love to talk to you about this as well. So if you see me at a conference and you've got something to say, then please come and say it to me. If you don't want to talk to me at a conference, then, well, email me. I keep looking over there because I'm expecting the email address to appear at richard.butcher@plsa.co.uk. And I'll be working with the team back at the PLSA office to pull all of that intelligence together, ready to publish another guide when we get to annual conference. So, we all, trustees, managers, consultants and providers and others, are being asked to do more. And we should frankly want to do more. This is our planet. This is our only planet. And we're helping you to do more at the PLSA. But one of the great things about this conference is that we are all here. The PLSA represents the full investment chain. So we collectively can begin work on finding solutions and becoming advocates for those solutions while we are here. We can do it here. We can do it today. We can do it tomorrow. We can do it on Friday. We might be able to do it for the next 2 weeks. We have a big responsibility to our members and savers to give them security, which includes environmental security, to help them achieve a better income in retirement. That, after all, is our mission. And so you'll see that playing through the event over the next 3 days. We'll enter the psychology of investment decision-making with Caroline Webb and Alison Strager. We'll understand how our minds can win over markets with cognitively diverse cognitively diverse teams. And we'll continue the theme of diversity with Baroness Warsi and a panel of experts. Plus, we'll be publishing a supporting Made Simple guide. We'll talk about DC defaults, CPIH, private market investment, DB funding and infrastructure. And we'll look at the threat that technology poses to democracy. There's a huge variety of material here. There's a huge variety of ways that you can absorb it. There's a huge variety of ways that you can talk to those others around you to share experience, because that's what the PLSA conferences are all about. Conference, welcome to Edinburgh. We have lots to do. We have a programme designed to provoke and to inspire. Please, now you're here, go out there and make the absolute most of it. Thank you very much.